Today I'd like to talk to you about how not to create weak characters. In fact, I'm going to give you 10 writing mistakes that people make when they create characters and how to avoid them.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
I'd like to welcome you to the Julia Amante channel. I am Julia Amante. I'm a women's fiction author, and I'm here to give you some writing tips to hopefully help you write your story, write a better story, write a stronger story. And today we're going to focus on characters. So I'm going to start by sharing that I've been watching a Netflix series. It's called 6 Feet Under. You might have heard of it. It's a series about a family of undertakers. There's the mom, the dad dies like on episode 1, so the mom is left alone. There are 2 brothers. One is sort of a playboy commitment phobe. The other one is gay. Then there is the daughter, who is a teenager, and she's a typical sort of, brooding teenager. She's in her last year of high school when the series starts. So the only reason that I'm actually watching this series is because I want to see the interplay between the characters. They're each so different and unique that I wanted to see how the writers are portraying them. And I've noticed quite a few things, some that work well, but then a lot of things that just don't work well at all. And a lot of mistakes that I think the writers are making with the series that could have been done a lot better. So first thing I want to say is that I haven't finished watching the series yet. I think I'm on season 4. So I haven't watched, but I've watched enough of it to be able to evaluate these characters. Okay, so the first one is Dave. Dave is the one character that I said is gay, and he has issues with that, especially at the very beginning. But what I really don't like about this is that he's just a very cliched character. There's very little growth in this character. He has no dimensions. He's really preoccupied with sex. And again, I just think it's very cliched. He's not, most normal gay people are not, that's not the only thing they think about. And it just seems like this character, that's his only preoccupation. It's the only thing he really cares about. There's a little bit of a dilemma there that he has sort of at the beginning between being able to accept his sexuality and also being since he's religious and he believes in God, and so there's a conflict between his sexuality and his religion. I thought that part was a little interesting because it did give him a little bit, just a little bit of depth, but mostly there's very little depth with this character. He's very one-dimensional, and so that I don't like. His brother has experienced some growth. So at the very beginning, he seemed very much like his brother. So his brother, this one is Nathan. And he, at the beginning, he was sort of this playboy. His only goal in life was just to have fun. And he just sort of reacts to life. So whatever happens, he just adjusts and reacts to life, but he doesn't take things too seriously. As the season goes on, he experiences a few things and he does react to that. But again, he's just reacting. He doesn't have a goal. One of the things we want our characters to have is a goal. He doesn't appear to have any goals at all. So he doesn't drive his life, right? It's driven for him. And so I think that is a problem in the story. The sister, Claire, is, again, like I mentioned, she's a very typical teenager, but I do think that she's actually the best character. She has, even though she is a typical teenager, she does have goals. She actually wants to do something different, wants to do something with her life. She's not sure what, but she wants to do something. She's always working towards either getting, at first it was getting out of high school, and then it's going to an art school. And so she's actually trying to drive her life in a direction. She's just not sure what yet. And she has no guidance because nobody in her family is able to guide her. So she is pretty interesting. She loves her family, but she is constantly led by some relationship with some guy because she, again, has no guidance. But she is the most interesting. At least she has various different dimensions to her personality. And then there's mom. I don't even remember her name because she's just so uninteresting, honestly. She's just a very clingy woman. She attaches herself to whatever new guy happens to be around. She's very needy. She's very needy, but she needs people to need her. But again, no growth. She just continues to make the same mistakes, continues to do the same thing. Well, it's this guy, and then I'm going to attach myself to this guy and hope that I can help him. She even attaches herself to a friend for a while. And it's just kind of the same character over and over and over again each episode. There's nothing new, there's nothing remarkable about this character. So, the first thing you want to avoid when you're creating a character is to create these one-dimensional characters. Okay, you want to make sure that your character is well developed, that your character has nuances, that your character is unpredictable in some ways. I mean, obviously they do need to have a personality, but they should have various interests. They should be just a well-developed person, because if they're not, then they just become a stereotype. They become a caricature of a person rather than a real person. And this is why I have problems with Dave. I don't think he seems authentic. He doesn't seem like a real person. And so you want to avoid that. So you don't want a one-dimensional character. Okay, the second problem is that lack of motivation. So again, like I mentioned, a lot of these characters, especially Nate, is not well motivated. He doesn't have the motivation that even his sister does. Okay, so you want to have a character that is motivated by something. Something needs to drive this character. This character needs to want something in order to move forward. And then, of course, they're going to find all kinds of obstacles to their desires, but they need to desire something. If you have a character that doesn't have any motivation, is not motivated by anything in the story, it starts to become stale. And the character also starts to feel unconvincing to your reader. Your reader just starts to think, well, this character is really kind of stupid. He doesn't do anything. He's always making the same mistakes. He's never growing. He doesn't want anything. So why am I even watching this? Why am I even reading this book, right? So your character needs to be motivated by something. You need to make sure that that is part of what when you create your character, that your character does have an ultimate goal. Even if he's slowly moving towards it, doesn't mean that overnight the character has to change. But little by little, we should see a little that, there is a motivation for something. There is something ultimate that this character wants, and he's slowly moving towards it. And this is why I think Claire is a better character, because she does want something. She wants to achieve something in her life. She wants to do something better. She doesn't really know what, right? So she wants to get to a college and can't afford that. Then she goes to an art school and thinks she wants that. So she's at least looking for something, and she's trying different things. Isn't achieving anything really yet, but it's a long series. It's going to take a while, and so it's okay for it to take a while. But they have to want something, and it has to be something worthwhile. Again, my problem with Dave, all he's interested in is sex. It's like, okay, that's wonderful. It's what everybody wants, but what else does he want? He has to be a full human being, more than a one-dimensional person, and so. No, writing a one-dimensional person, writing a character without motivation, those are two big problems. Another mistake that writers make with characters when they're creating their characters is that they create characters that are too perfect. Now, nobody has done that in this show. All these characters have almost too many flaws. In fact, my husband got tired of the series. He was watching it with me, and he was like, all these they have way too many problems. It's like, well, actually, that's the one good thing about this show. They do have a lot of problems. There's a lot of conflict. We want that. But if the character is too perfect, then there's no reason for the reader to keep reading, because there's nothing there, right? There's nothing that we are looking for the character to change or to grow or to transform. As part of what we like in stories is to see a character transformation. So you don't want to write overly perfect characters either. Okay, they need to have some kind of flaw, something that they're trying to overcome, something that keeps them from getting their goal immediately or their desire immediately. It doesn't have to be a huge goal, but it can be just little flaws that your character has that makes them a little bit more interesting than just a perfect character. Okay, another problem, another issue, something you want to avoid is writing inconsistent characters. So what does that mean? It means that the character is doing something that it doesn't make sense for that character. So I recorded a video a week or two ago about knowing and understanding psychologically what goes on in your character's head, and how that's going to help you to develop a much better, stronger character. If you haven't seen that video, I suggest you do, because I go into like why we want to understand like the reasons that characters behave in certain ways. And if we understand that, we'll know exactly how our character is going to behave in any situation. And then you won't be writing an inconsistent character. You won't write a character that'll do something that's like, well, why would this character do this? They believe in this. This is what their goal is. This is what they're afraid of, and all of a sudden they're doing something completely different without showing why, right? If you can, our characters can do anything if we explain why they did that. So if they fear a certain thing and all of a sudden they do it, they face that fear, there has to be a reason why they would face it. Otherwise, they probably won't. They aren't going to do something that's against their character, against their values, unless there's a good reason for them to do it. So you want to explain why they're doing something if they're doing something differently. Otherwise, they're just going to seem inconsistent. Like, this character would never do this. Why are they doing it? And the reader is going to get frustrated with you. All right, the next thing you want to avoid, the next problem, is writing cliched or stereotyped characters. And we don't want to do this because it makes writers seem lazy, like they're just reaching for a type of person rather than an actual person. It tells the reader that you did not want to spend the time to develop your character, so you just created this very cliched character. That could be just about anybody, right? And it could be that type of person. It also can be insulting if you stereotype a culture, or if you stereotype a type of person. So you want to avoid cliches and using stereotypes. Now, what happens when you do is that the character, again, just does not feel real. It feels like the character is lifeless, like it really doesn't have a life. It's not a real person. And readers start to think, like, does this character actually even care about anything? Does this character even know who he is? Does this character have any goals, any motivation? Because we don't believe that this is a real character. It just doesn't seem like a real person to us. So if you're using maybe overly used tropes or anything like that, then look into that and say, okay, am I adding a little twist here? Is this sounding like every other type of detective, every other type of romance novel, every other type of this type of character? This is why the clingy mom doesn't really work for me, right, in this TV series, because she's just a stereotype. She's not, she doesn't know herself, and she's not really trying to really figure out herself either. She just is this type of person. And she attaches herself to different people, and then she wants to wait on them and do things for them because that's who she is, which that's great, but there is no profundity to this character. So you may say, well, I don't intend to write a stereotypical character. Well, no, but when you're reading through it, if it starts to sound like any other character or a lot of other characters from books, then you need to look at it and evaluate it and say, okay, am I adding anything new? Have I really thought about who this character is psychologically, how he behaves, how he reacts to other people, how he behaves in groups, things like that. We want to know all of that about your character so that you can write a realistic character rather than a stereotype. Okay, the next problem that writers do is they forget that characters need to grow. So they don't add that into that arc of the character. Or they think they're changing the character, but the character isn't really changing. For example, you might say, well, my character's becoming braver, so I'm showing that growth. How are you showing that? Does the character actually slowly build towards becoming a braver person? Or does the character, all of a sudden stand up for himself or somebody, but then kind of reverts back to the person he was before? Well, that's not really growth. It might have been a fear. It might have been a once in a lifetime thing, right? Maybe their business is getting held up, and so they stand up, or they push somebody down so that they don't get shot or something. And it could be just adrenaline, or it could be something else, right? So it could be a hint of this character actually becoming more brave, but you're not showing the change and the growth in the character as they take smaller steps to become a different person. So by the end of your novel, your character should have transformed into whoever it is that you're trying to transform the character into, right? A braver person, a kinder person. There has to be massive change, and it has to not just be one thing that happens. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So that's one error that people make, is that they forget that the character has to grow in the novel. Another problem is the lack of internal conflict. So not only do you need your external conflict, but you need internal conflict within your character. Your character is going to grow and change and transform because of the internal changes that are happening within him. Those internal dilemmas that are going on within your character are deepening your character. It's also creating a connection between the reader and your character, because your reader is going to start to root for this person. They're going to see these internal conflicts that your character has, the damages that he has, whatever, and they're going to root for your character to get over it, to do better, to learn how to deal with these problems so that they can achieve their external goal, right? So once they make those internal changes and they learn how to deal with that, they're going to become a better person. They're going to transform, and they're going to be able to reach their goal. So failing to create that internal conflict means not fully developing your character. Okay, and then this can be a problem as well. It's not as common, but I do see it sometimes. It's just no distinctive traits, physical traits for your character. If you notice real people, we all have certain tics or something that we do, either when we get nervous or we get excited or something. Like I remember when a best friend of mine, when she would get upset, like her shoulders would go up. And I could tell that, she was getting tense. Or my brother-in-law, when he was excited and he was talking, he would like tap his like leg. And again, this was a trait that he had. So real people have physical traits. We also have emotional traits. So we might say things, behave certain ways, have facial expressions that we get when something happens, when we're excited, when we're sad, when we're scared, right? Now there are typical ones that everybody has, but there might be a certain trait that only your character has. And it's good to add those to your story because it helps the reader to notice who this person is, like who's speaking. Maybe they start to learn this character's traits, so then they know when you don't even need a tag. You know when a character says something, either by the way they say it or by their physical behavior and the way that they move their body and the tics or whatever they have. And you need to really do this when you have a book with multiple characters. So it's not just one or two or three or four, but there's a lot of characters. I read a book, it was a really, really good book, but it had a lot of characters. And after like 3 chapters, I was so confused. I'm like, wait, who's who? Because we have the brother, and then we have his brother, and we have that man's, first man's children and wife, and then we have the second man's children and cousin, and all. There were just so many characters. And the author did add some traits stuff, but it was hard to place all of these people. So first that's a different thing, but you want to add your people a little bit at a time rather than tossing them all in there. But you want to give them distinctive ways for the reader to recognize who they are. Okay, another common problem is writing weak or unconvincing dialogue. Now I do have a lot of videos that I've created on writing dialogue, so do take a look at some of those. I'll try to link them somewhere in here, but you can just do a search on dialogue and you'll find a lot of my videos. But dialogue, you want to have convincing dialogue, and dialogue can be a little tricky because a lot of people try to write dialogue the way that people speak, and we absolutely should write dialogue the way people speak. However, not exactly, right? So when we speak, we have a lot of ums in our writing, in our speaking. We have a lot of unnecessary words. We go off on tangents. We start a story and go off to something else, and we come back to the story. We don't want to do things like that in story dialogue in novels. But we want to mimic real dialogue. We want to make it sound sort of like real dialogue, not exactly. But like again, take a look at some of my other videos because I go into detail. But writing bad or inconsistent dialogue, or the character doesn't sound even like himself, that could be a problem. So make sure that your dialogue is well written and that it sounds like each person sounds different. They have their own vocabulary, their own way of saying things, and you can tell when one character is speaking and when another character is speaking. And lastly, another mistake that I see in novels is that writers focus on their main characters, which is good, but they forget to give their secondary characters any kind of depth at all. Supporting characters, especially if they're going to be in a book for the entire story, need to have their own motivations, their own conflicts, their own struggles. It's going to be very minor compared to the main characters, but there should be something. Like your supporting characters are not just there to help your character talk, right? Or just to say something about your character. They're there for their own reason. They just happen to help your character with whatever it is your character is doing, right? So those supporting characters, maybe a best friend who's also going through their own issue. They're having to move out of the country for whatever reason, and and your character is, feeling lonely, and all of a sudden they're going to lose their best friend or whatever, right? So it helps your main plot, but that other character has their own issues, their own problems, their own struggles, and that makes them seem like a real person. Again, not just a stick figure who's just there for your main character to bounce problems off of. Okay. All right. So how do we avoid all of these mistakes? Well, it's easy, right? We want to spend as much time creating our characters as we do with our plot. So we might spend, a lot of time devising our plot, thinking about what's going to happen, what the problems are going to be. We want to spend equal amount of time building our characters and deciding who they are, what their motivations are, what their, goals are, what's going to keep them from getting that psychologically, what are their internal conflicts, what are all those things that we want to know about characters. You want to make decisions, your plot decisions, based on your character. So who is this character? What does this character want? And what's going to keep this character from getting those things? That is going to help you. If you understand your character, what motivates your character, who this character is going to help you to write your plot, actually. And your character will never act in unnatural or strange ways. Your character will always feel like a real person, and they're motivated. They're doing things that your character would naturally do. Your character isn't going to feel one-dimensional. Your character isn't going to feel like a stereotype. Your character is going to feel like a real person who is forced to make decisions based on their past, based on the events that are happening today, and they're going to either get into trouble because of the decisions they make, because of the person they are, or they're going to do well and they're going to be able to solve their problems. Another way to minimize those mistakes is to have readers, like have people read your book and say, hey, do my characters sound realistic? Am I making mistakes here? Does my character feel real? Does it feel like a stereotype? Do I need to deepen this character? Is there anything that character is doing that's inconsistent? Can you envision them? Are they interesting? Okay, so you want your readers, do you want to ask your readers to read your book, give you some feedback, and make decisions and rewrites based on what they say. And lastly, you're always reading, I hope. So read your favorite books and see like which characters feel real to you. What decisions did that author make to make this character feel realistic? And and try to add that to your writing. So whatever it is this author did, you can do that as well, right? Maybe they developed the character slowly. Maybe they gave the character certain traits. So make sure that you do a lot of reading, because that is going to help you with your own writing as well. All right. I hope that this again has helped you with characters. So I've done quite a few videos on characters. So watch those videos and try to incorporate some of the stuff into your own writing so that you are writing stronger, better, relatable characters. All right, I hope this has helped. If it has, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, share the video with other writers, and come back next week for another video. I'll see you then.